And Ladonna, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Noah. I appreciate the opportunity just to share about our work, especially because we've made such significant progress since the case study. And what we were hoping to discover and actually be able to share is true results in water conservation, where the aquifer is being more protected and we're extending its lifetime here in eastern New Mexico. So that is exactly what's happening, and we have some really rich data over the last few years, and we've got more data on the way. So I'm going to be talking about what our monitoring data shows. It was done through the New Mexico Tech and the New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources. So they just do such a fine job with the aquifer mapping and then reporting out those results compared over the years after getting a baseline. And we just got done in December with our latest monitoring testing out in the project area. So I will just share my screen and then we'll start having a conversation about what we're seeing. And let me hit the presentation mode. There we go. Our model, for those of you who aren't real familiar with it, but if you've read the case study at all or heard anything about us, you have a pretty good background. So I didn't want to repeat that. I just wanted to give an overview. We fully retire irrigation wells. That's what this model does. It fully retires the wells in the Ogallala Paleo channels. We have two channels of priority there, a priority 1 and 2, and we're working for first and foremost priority 1 where the richest water source is, and then priority 2 we're now navigating in that area and beginning to retire irrigation wells there as well. This eliminates irrigation pumping. It doesn't like reduce it. It's not like some other models I've seen. It is 100% retired irrigation because it absolutely is not sustainable. And we discovered that early on when the landowners approached us voluntarily wanting to come up with an idea, a concept that could help support them if they were willing to retire their irrigation wells and then transition to another form of agricultural production. So that is exactly what we've endeavored to do, thereby conserving the groundwater in place and resulting in measurable aquifer recovery. Here's our project scale. It's expanded significantly since we began. We were under 11,000 acres in the project area when we started. We're now at 34,000 plus, and we have priority 1 and 2 total parcels at 126 parcels. Again, that's almost tripled in the parcels. The irrigation wells that are retired are 56 altogether. And we look at a parcel by parcel implementation because it's not just about the acres, it's what each parcel represents. And some of these parcels are water rich. And we discovered that when we metered with a wraparound flow meter on the center pivots, how much groundwater we had in gallons per minute of annual water production. So we learned early on to not necessarily discredit or not give the significance to a single parcel in the area, especially in the northwest section of our project area. We have saved annually, I guess I will say 3.7 billion gallons of irrigation pumping avoided. Sorry, the D is not there. I should have checked that, but avoided annually. That's how much would have gone on the ground the last 4 years that have not. And that's based on seasonal irrigation use over a 12-month year. So I have taken into account how much water is actually being used for irrigation pumping for farming versus how much we actually metered when we did our original test on the center pivots. Because that's a different figure. It's about more like 4.15 billion gallons altogether. But then this calculation takes it down to what actually would be used for farming. Now, when you look at that versus how many actual acre feet does it appear is currently stored in the area, it'd be about 12,846 acre feet that we could say are currently available and become more so. They increase over time as we bring on new wells and new farmers. We're about to bring on 2 new contracts. Water right lease agreements is what we do for the short term. So that's a 3, and now it's becoming about a 5-year because it will have 2 extensions in order to keep the wells turned off. So we go under agreement with them and we pay them based on the appraised value of the groundwater. And under that value, they get an annual payment every June without fail until we get their wells and that water, 80% of it under groundwater conservation easement in perpetuity. So it is conserved in place through pumping cessation and then through the conservation easement. Our monitoring framework is a baseline mapping done by Rawling, and you can find this publication online, OFR-626, and also multi-year monitoring, and Rawling has continued to do that work for us. Plus, we've added our data in as he requested, then we provide data. We've included as well some wells around us because we thought that was important, because the city of Clovis purchased 10 wells years ago when I was a city commissioner. We understood the importance of trying to retire some irrigation wells close to Cannon Air Force Base because they were running out of water, based on their own study called the Trinity Analysis, which was commissioned by the Air Force Special Operations Command to see what things look like for their water resilience. And that was the first indicator we got in 2012 that we had an issue and we needed to start taking steps to try to support Cannon Air Force Base. It is a significant special operations wing, and it also has the Melrose Air Force Range. So we wanted to work in combination with our military to save as much groundwater out there as possible. And then in return, honestly, they have funded this project as far as all of the payments for these retired irrigation wells per landowner. And there are about to be 9 of them, actually 10 of them in there this spring. And they've paid every payment except for that which was matched by the state of New Mexico. And we've had matching funds along the way. We got 2 years of matching funds, and I've sought a 3rd year recently. But the majority, the lion's share of this money comes from the REPI, which is the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program under what's now called the Department of War. And that's who we're working with. And in doing so, they've assured us that our community will benefit from this water. So this is going to be supplemental groundwater for Clovis, also now for Texaco. Cannon also did their own independent well measurements inside the fence line, so we have more than one data point. We have outside the fence line, what's it looking like, and inside the fence line. So here's where the real data is. The rich data is telling us how the aquifer is responding to this well retirement. So observed water level change 2023 to 2024. 6 of the 22 monitored wells increased, and that range was from 0.41 feet to 12.98 feet. Now, we understood that this initial had more to do with the flattening of the cone of depression. So understanding that, we knew we would want to see the next year, did we gain any more ground or not? 5 out of 6 enrolled irrigation wells, because he only measures 22 wells altogether. And so that would represent 5 of our 6 landowners, and 5 of their wells were chosen. And they rose as much as 12.98 feet and as little as 0.41 as mentioned. And then there was an adjacent dryland well that he measured that it came up 1.50 feet just by being in close proximity to these retired irrigation wells. Now, this is the big year, though. This year, 16 monitored wells increased. You're looking at the same wells. You're not adding new wells. You're staying the course. You want apples to apples. So Dr. Rawling went out, did his measurement in December, and the same well, not the same, but 5 out of 6 wells rose again, but we had one not rise. So it was a little bit different, the one that rose, the one that didn't rise, but still 5 out of 6 rose from the previous year. And that range this time was 0.80 feet to plus 3.35 feet. So 5 out of 6 enrolled irrigation wells measured rose, 11 adjacent dryland wells measured rose, and we're talking static water levels. This is hydraulic recovery from pumping cessation. This has nothing to do with recharge. We see minimal recharge out there. I'm sure you know that because precipitation is very, very low here. We went through that extreme drought period, and we have some playa restoration in the field area, but not significant. And playas do yield some recharge, but I could not attribute this to recharge. The independent confirmation we got this year, over time, I should say, with Cannon Air Force Base static water levels, is that they just continue decline since they've been declining. And since we first took a look at the data in 2023 for static water level increases, 2024, they declined even more. And then this past year, this December 2025, they rose 2 to 2.5 feet. That's significant for us because Canada just hasn't seen that. I guess since the beginning of recognizing their challenges out there. These were conducted again independently by a Cannon Air Force Base contractor that does this work for them. Conservation tools that are in use that I've mentioned. First, the water right lease agreement, very important agreement with currently 9 or with 8 landowners. We'll have 10 online this coming year. This is a 3-year agreement. It's very specific about the appraised value of the groundwater, how much water they have in the measurement phase, and then all the requirements for them to stay true to the contract. And any penalties are outlined very well, and that will be metering, watching the water on a monthly basis, and any other requirements they must keep in compliance with. They have never not been in compliance. We've had 0 issues with the landowners. They're wonderful to work with. The conservation easements will hold 80% of the groundwater that we've conserved in perpetuity. The only reason the 20% remains outside of it is because we're counting on that as a supplemental water source. And it will be the landowners that have the opportunity to sell that 20% source to our water utility EPCOR if they choose to do so. It's always up to them. So it's a voluntary decision. If they want to sell the water. And some of them, to be quite honest, don't want the water to move. They would like it just to stay all in there 100%. And others are contemplating that possibility, but we want that to be farther down the line to give plenty of time for this aquifer portion of the aquifers to continue to improve. And then what we do with them is work with every one of these landowners that are retiring irrigation wells and no longer doing irrigation farming. They still need to take care of the land. We want that land to stay productive, and we want to see it in agricultural production in some way, shape, or form. So several have moved into grazing. They've added more cattle. Some are doing a combination of dry land and cattle grazing. And we're looking at other opportunities as we're talking to several environmental agencies, entities that are interested in perhaps pollinators, carbon. We're not sure what we're going to see in carbon credits out there, but maybe carbon credits, and just stacking the benefits of opportunity for our landowners, but being really wise about that. What should we grow? What should we support? How can we ensure wildlife, because we have plenty of it, it continues to be supported, and that we continue to advance playas. We just got an award for a $270,000 playa restoration. It's 22 acres. We were excited about that out of NIFWIF, and we'll continue to seek other dollars. Orsted supported us for a smaller playa restoration. So we're just trying to seek every available opportunity to gain ground in this project area to make it healthy soils and other water sources, and even using holistic management approach, both a full holistic management as well as holistic grazing management. We just finished training in that area so that we can keep them whole and productive. And that's also a commitment of the United States Air Force. This is the project area so that you can get a sense of what we're really doing. This is a much more complex map than ever did I even envision before. I had a great GIS specialist put this together for me once I described what I was after, how I wanted it coded. So this is one you might have to spend some time with, but here's what you can see. In the upper northwest section that I said was so water rich up here, we went after this right away. And you can see it has a lot of the diagonal hatches, which means it was irrigated. And it could go right back to irrigation. If they chose to come out of the contract this coming year and didn't want to stay in it, they can do that. But no one's done that for 4 years yet. So this is, I have about 64, 65 parcels actually, because the number 0 is in the midst of the priority 1 parcels. So there are 65 of them. Priority 1 parcels are in black numbers and priority 2 parcels are in red numbers. The green, light green, means they're in a water right lease agreement and a conservation easement. So what you can see in this upper northwest is all of these folks have applied for conservation easements, and they're in progress as we speak with these easements. Then when you get to this yellow in the center section, that indicates dry land. It was dry land to begin with. It's still dry land. We're going to try to wrap those parcels up at some point later down the line, simply to prevent them from ever returning to irrigation, although it would be rather costly for them to do so, because they have not been irrigating for 30 plus years. Then these turquoise parcels, there are some of them, and those are important to us because they're water right lease agreement only. We'd still like to see them come on in with us to a conservation easement, and they are still considering, but these particular landowners are waiting to see how the first conservation easements look. Does it go well? Are these farmers happy with that arrangement or not? The active irrigated that remains are all orange with your, again, diagonal hatches. So we lack about 5,200 plus acres of irrigated land to get under contract. And as you can see right here, these 4 right bumped up against Cannon and 2 at the bottom, that's all one landowner, but those parcels are in litigation due to the PFAS contamination that occurred out by Cannon. So that's why, honestly, we can't even move on those particular parcels at this time because it is under litigation. And then you see all this yellow down here. That's most of that is brand new because a rancher made the decision, asked us, can I put all of my extra ranch, it's a separate ranch from the one that we're working in currently, can I put all my ranch land in here under a conservation easement for the future? I'd like to add it to the project. And the United States Air Force said yes, and they did so enthusiastically. Any questions on this map? Okay, I'll move forward. So to strengthen the model right now, we have a lot happening in the background. So the United States Air Force, Secretary of the Air Force approached us this year, actually last year, about September-ish, and said, we'd like to pay for the following studies to try to strengthen your understanding of what's going on out there and what more we could do to save more water. So we're going with an aerial electromagnetic survey done by USGS. They will be conducting that in January. I meet with the Secretary of the Air Force personnel next week to discuss exactly how this will be done. They're going to be doing 3 days of open like town halls or bringing people in to prepare them for the flyover, because it is, you do notice it is a helicopter with a large object hanging down from it that goes across, as you know. I don't have to describe this, but it's obvious. So we want them to know it's not a UFO, it's not some invasive flying craft. It's there to actually give us great information about our aquifer. It's going to cover a large area, significantly larger than where I'm working. So it will be Curry County, Roosevelt County, and part of Quay County. So it will get us some great data. We're also having a brackish water study done and paid for by the United States Air Force, and that's through Indy Water. They won the contract for that, and we are anxious to see if our brackish water could be beneficial. And then thirdly, that same company will do a direct and indirect potable reuse study and make a determination about direct and indirect potable water, reuse water. So we'll determine if that's also a viable option. We just don't want to leave anything on the table. So we're considering all alternative approaches, alternative water sources. This should also improve our targeting and reduce our uncertainty, especially in the aquifer. That's what I'm looking forward to. Where is my saturated thickness the best in that aquifer? It should tell us that. Where would we have the best opportunity for recharge if we did some recharge, like externally recharge? So I don't know what that looks like yet, but that's what we're after. I already mentioned our remaining risk, which is 5,200, and I'll round it to 19 irrigated acres still active. And if you thought about how much water that would cost us over 40 years, it'd be about 156,563 acre feet. So it does really add up over time. And I'll be honest with you, every drop of our aquifer is significantly important. It is our only water source still here in Clovis, Curry County, and Texaco on this side of Curry County. Not all of Curry County has the aquifer, but certainly we do, and several communities around us, and all the way into Roosevelt County. So this aquifer is critical for our water supply. Definitely potable concerns there to have the water available until the Ute Water Project brings surface water all the way from Logan, New Mexico, through a transmission line to get it here. But that's in the future. So we've got to make this water last and make the most of it. I feel like really what we've demonstrated is that in Curry County is that groundwater decline is not inevitable when pumping is fully retired and outcomes are measured. Now, I could say that also that stands true for if I reduced pumping, that it would make a difference as well, but it won't make the significant impact that we're seeing with fully retired irrigation wells because there's so much water that's been saved in that area. So its longevity will be much more significant than going in and just minimizing the use. For example, if we decided to set up a LEMA, and so we had this management area where several farmers joined hands, made an agreement, we'll reduce by 20%. Yes, we would still see a benefit from that. And in fact, we're talking about doing that possibly in another area or two where it's not as critical, just to make more gains. But we understood that with a 95% drawdown from the Ogallala Aquifer in our area and only 5% available for potable water use for domestic industrial, that it was urgent and truly imperative that we retire irrigation wells. And that's just my contact information. If anybody wants to reach out to me via email or cell phone, I answer pretty readily or get right back to folks via voicemail. So I'll stop sharing now and just say that concludes the presentation of information.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ladonna. So I'll open it. I have a few questions come to mind, but I'll open it up to the rest of you if you have any questions or comments. I guess, first thing I was thinking about is this the conservation easements that you're describing and that folks are, kind of watching how it's going to go. I guess, I'm familiar with the kind of land trust model where a conservation easement is applying to, development rights over a piece of land, but yours is the only project I know of that's doing this with water rights. So could you talk about some of the particular challenges of figuring out how to do a conservation easement for water?
Sure. In fact, that's a really superior question, Noah, because this week, actually just last week, the NRCS technical reviewer at the national level sent us a series of questions that he wanted answered out of the concern that we're putting the priority on groundwater. And this has not been done through NRCS before in an RCPP, right? So they're like, we understand the importance of the groundwater, and we're not saying no, but we need to know how you're going to do this with the Office of the State Engineer. So great question. There were several questions around this, and even one of the questions is, why don't you just, you just use less water? Well, that one was easy to answer. We don't have that option. That option doesn't exist. We just have to retire irrigation wells and save everything we can. But I think what we're doing, in fact, I don't think I know what we're doing is this, paving the way for everyone else and for ourselves. If we can get the first easement across the line, I've got 9 coming in behind them. So how do we get all 10 conservation easements in place with the priority, the highest value that we are protecting and paying the landowner for is the groundwater beneath the land, nothing surface, nothing surface. So I worked with the OSE from the beginning. So I'm all the way back to being with Tom Blaine, to then John D'Antonio, to then working with Mike Hammond, and throughout that time, then working with Nat Chakris. And they had to make decisions about how to help support us as we retired the irrigation wells so they didn't forfeit their water rights. And now we're putting those water rights in a conservation stewardship program to protect them in perpetuity and keep the water rights still with the land. Now, the water rights don't need to be reassigned. They belong to those landowners. They can't access them more than the 20% we discussed. The 80% is under conservation, but nevertheless, keeping them tied to the land is extremely important. We don't want the water to go anywhere else, especially given we're putting it in a protected position. But there are going to have to be some new guidelines. There are going to have to be some rules that have to be considered and how we're going to navigate ensuring that that occurs. And this is a recognized approach to an easement. Now, keep in mind that you've got Senator Bennett out of Colorado, and Moran and Heinrich are with him every step of the way trying to get a voluntary groundwater conservation easement in place. I mean, it's a voluntary groundwater conservation act. He started working on it in 2023. He's still working to hopefully this legislative session aggressively get it across the finish line. We'd hope to see it considered in the Farm Bill, but it didn't make it there yet. The Farm Bill itself hasn't been, hasn't been successful. So we are, though, going to endeavor to address every hurdle we've got to get over to get this work done, because the truth is New Mexico needs us to get this done. And everyone that I talk with, from Patrick McCarthy to Hannah Risley White to Liz Anderson and down the line, Phil King. I mean, I could just keep throwing out names, and even the Environmental Defense Fund working with Maurice Hall and others, and all the committees I'm sitting on, including the Groundwater Alliance Committee that just released the New Mexico Groundwater 360 report. We have concurred. This is vital work. We have got to make it happen. So this is probably going to require me to get some expert legal assistants and legal attorneys. I have one. I may need more. I have Peter Nichols out of Colorado. He's an exceptional water rights attorney, and how we may have to approach water right law in New Mexico to get this groundwater protected in perpetuity. Now, I will say that Peter Nichols was able to get the United States Air Force and specifically the Department of Defense at the time to understand groundwater is real estate property. And that was not accepted until we ventured out there and pushed the envelope. But it is accepted now and written as an exception to their regulations. So I'm just saying, kind of lining out for you, we have our work cut out for us, but we've answered every question they sent. We're waiting for the responses, but we believe we're carving a new trail in the conservation easement perspective in New Mexico.
My question is about monitoring. So I've worked with a land trust for years, and for us, we just have to go look and see whether there's any structures or any other, things, or for a big, for a large property, a big ranch, we might send up a drone. But you've got, monitoring groundwater means some fairly expensive measurements. Do you have to do it every year for every easement the way it works for a regular kind of ag easement? And that must be a pretty expensive prospect, right?
Yes, we will have to. Now, when it goes under easement, since you use the word easement, it's not under easement yet.
Mhm.
But when it is, yes, we will have to meter every single one of the wells. And what we're looking at doing there is the digital equipment in order to track those wells off location instead of having to constantly go out and visit the individual wells. But currently, I'm working with the Farmers Electric Co-op, except on some of the wells that are gas driven. So my turbines, gas turbines, I can't. I have to go out, put meters, they're metered. But the other wells are electric, and FEC has worked with me with a formula where I get to see the meter readings, the kilowatts per hour, and I can convert that into exactly how much water is used, because they are allowed an amount of water to maintain the
Sure.
wells and the pumps, right?
Yeah.
So they just have to stay under no more than that. And so far, we're good.
Great. Thanks.
Could you talk a little bit more about the what's going on the land, the transition to dry land and ranching, and how that's going for farmers? What kind of experiences they're having.
Yes. Well, the first year after we retired the wells was tough because we had a really dry year after that. So dry land cropping didn't go as well as we had hoped, but that's where they started. Then we've been bringing in other like support, I would say technical support, areas of expertise to try to identify what we should do to move toward. Now, my big rancher, he is with Prime Pursuits, 44 Farms Prime Pursuits. So he grows Black Angus calves. But he had his best year this last year. Of course, we had those stellar rains, for several months that shocked everybody here on my side of the state, but it made all the difference. So it's kind of stood in the gap for us to have banner year crops, including calves, for that year. But what we're working on is the holistic management and getting a full understanding from every angle of what each landowner needs to do in order to not just remain whole, but to have a great legacy plan in place for themselves as well as those who have children who want to work the farms and continue the generational agricultural production. But the holistic management also includes holistic grazing and working to bring up the grass, the natural grasses, by using your cattle. So we're now looking at that, the paddocks concept, and how that can work through the Savory Institute. And we're also working with the Provenance out of Kansas. And we just got done with a 2-day training just as the baseline in the first part of December. But we're also talking to the Western Landowners Alliance. They're talking to us about pollinators. Then I've got another group talking to me about leasing the land from the farmers at so much an acre, some of the land, and then they want to farm it, like bringing up young farmers who can't afford to have or buy land. But it's it's really a great approach to help them then become the farmers they want to be through the lands that we have available, and they learn to farm it well. We're working with NCAT Soil for Water, also on soil health. So we're just excited about getting some things in place. And that's just some of them. I'm working with a Chris Grotegut out of Texas, because I'm also working in Texas, Lubbock and Amarillo, and they're helping. Chris is exceptional in what he's been able to do on his land. And we're definitely going to tap into that expertise because he's growing things that we hadn't even thought about growing. So we've got to identify what is feasible to grow in this particular area if we're going to rely on very little water, as at the same time we just think about new opportunities like pollinators. Do we want to do that? Is there some particular species we want to support more that the Department of Game and Fish would like us to be consider, and that compensation may come somewhat there. So again, it goes back to stacking the benefits to help them to still remain whole. Currently, they haven't lost an inch of ground because they're getting paid at what they were making for their crop production based on a 3-year yield. So that has not cost them anything at this point, but it will once they go into the conservation easement and get the larger payout. They want to keep keeping those lands productive.
Christy has a question in the chat here that she can't talk out loud because she's in a shared office. But have you thought about agrivoltaics? So combining solar panels with grazing or growing some rain-fed crops for another income stream?
Yes, well, they won't allow us in RCS under the RCPP. We can't do a company solar installation farm. So if that, I was surprised by that. We are still not sure, we can't fight that. I don't know if we can negotiate our way out of that. But currently, they're only allowing them to use solar themselves for growing for their own use on their personal needs on their farms, their lands, but not bringing in a solar farm. I don't know if that answers the question or not. Yes, okay.
Oh.
Yeah. It's disappointing.
Yeah. So could you explain what you just said about the bigger payout for the conservation easement? So how are you calculating how much an easement is worth? Like how many years worth of water is it equivalent to?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question because we fought hard for our landowners on this one. Because we're in a whole new dynamic here. This is new, this is novel. This is not about the land. And we've emphasized this every step of the way from the beginning within RCS to the current day. The number one value on the land is under the land, and that's that groundwater. So you're going to have to consider what that groundwater did. How did it work? What did it yield? And therefore, what is it worth over time and into the future? What are you taking away from them? Because that's a considerable asset. That is the number one benefit outlined in the conservation easement. And it took me some time to write that language because no one's written it before. So writing the language surrounding the water for how it should be considered in the conservation easement deed was really critical. Now, our appraiser did a beautiful job, but it took us getting to two appraisers to get an understanding of how do I value the groundwater on the land, because I'm not finding lands that are comparable to do this with. And you know, in the easement world, you're supposed to go and identify other properties and what did it sell for, but nobody was selling them with the groundwater in mind. So we're resetting the bar. We're setting the baseline, I should say, not resetting. We're setting the baseline. At current time, I have 3 easements appraised. And my biggest easement came in huge. We were taken aback by it. But when you decide that the diminished rate of that easement is going to be 71 to 72% diminished value of that property by removing its ability to access the groundwater, it's a game changer. It really changes the value, because most groundwater, not groundwater, but most conservation easements are at about 50% within RCS in a diminished value rate. But this is going to be 71. My first one is 71, about 0.2%. And it made a significant difference in the payout on 3,684 acres of land. That was exciting news that already got the rest of the landowners pretty excited about what they could look to, because they will apply that rate to every one of the conservation easements. I don't see that lowering. So it's going to be a significant payout for our landowners. And that, to be honest with you, they may all the more decide they're willing to lease their lands to young up and coming farmers, because they may be like, I have this much money and now I'm going to do this and let somebody else take care of this land and make the most of it. Our commitment is to ensure that we've done a highly erodible land act plan, and that we're taking care of the land, and the soils remain healthy and productive. How they do that, we'll work with them toward that end. But I can say these conservation easements look very attractive to our group because, number one, the restrictions are minimal. The major restriction is you may not employ irrigation farming.
Do you have, I mean, it may not have happened yet, but
Mhm.
one of the things I've been thinking about for years about the Ogallala is how much has farming changed the landscape, so that going back to a pasture system is difficult. And I'm wondering if you have experience yet on what sort of, like inputs you would need to restore prairie coming back from land that's been cultivated for decades.
Yes, that's a great question, Mark. Unfortunately, my rancher, who has obviously very large ranching properties, he is not a generational farmer or rancher. And he literally started when he was 13. He had no land. He worked some land, and then he ended up being able to buy that land from the man he worked for years, and then he kept buying more, and he started in farming, crop production solely. And then he decided, oh, 20 years ago, let me start moving into out of growing crops and into pasture land and raising Black Angus calves. He has done that extremely successfully. And he's been with 44 Farms Prime Pursuits now, I believe, for 5 or 6 years, and has done exceptionally well. So we are talking to him and tapping Ronnie, that's his name, Ronnie Montague of Montague Ranches. He is really doing an exceptional work out there that, if you've seen the price of cattle, obviously doing very well this year. And his calf production was superior to any other year. But I think he's got a lot of insights for us, but also working with others that have knowledge in going back to prairie land. We're teaming with those folks as well to get there, even though I'm going to say it again, several of my farmers want us to keep growing dryland crops and just run some cattle. So they very much are still vested into putting something in the ground and helping it to grow and produce a yield. I will say, I'll just add while I'm sitting here, none of this is easy. It hasn't been easy at all. I can't begin to tell you the battles I fought. So if I were sitting and talking to a group about what to get ready for, I would definitely walk them through the battles because they are many. I cannot believe how politicized it is, but it's highly politicized working with groundwater. And it's unfortunate the politics that get involved, and sometimes there's animosity. Sometimes they're angry at me and my landowners. Why are you doing this? Why, would you want to give up ranching or farming, or not ranching, but farming and growing crops through irrigation? They just don't understand. Or why are you going into conservation easements? You're destroying, private lands. And it just goes on and on. The American Stewards of Liberty as well have been a strong force working against us in this area, trying to get this project completed. Thank you, Christy. That's very kind. Thank you.
So, is there a kind of lack of understanding or active disbelief in the decline of groundwater?
Yes. See, that's the big one, Noah. There's an active disbelief, and here's the reason. I turn my faucet on, water comes out, period. Right? So I don't think we're really losing. I mean, I've had a soil and water conservation district, not my own, but another one say, oh, we've seen drought before. We've seen this before. The water always comes back. You guys don't have this down right. The aquifer's not being mined completely. It's not being depleted at a rapid rate. It'll come back full force all over again. Those are the kinds of conversations that I have with folks that absolutely refuse to accept the reality, our hydrologic reality of where we are today in the Ogallala Aquifer.
Wow.
I know.
But so at the same time that that's very disheartening, you clearly have had success in, convincing at least the landowners you're working with that this is important and valuable. How do you reach people? Have you been able to change anyone's mind on these issues?
Yes, yeah, yes, actually, I have. There is that positive side of changing people's minds because, how can you refute the data? Yeah, I mean, you just can't refute the data of an aquifer mapping work. And I think the USGS aerial electromagnetic survey will strengthen the data. But when you look at the cannon inside the fence line and they're getting the same data, and they conducted their own Trinity analysis in 2012, it's really hard to just be in denial unless you want to say you don't believe in data. You've got to get to the point of saying that. So yes, I've had some converts, and I think though the ones, Noah, that concern me the most, and they're honestly in the panhandle of Texas as much as they are on the eastern side of New Mexico. And those are the ones who say, well, it's our water and let's just go ahead and take it down to the last drop, period. Let's just see if we can mine the whole thing dry. Though that's the ones that keep me up at night, honestly, because you have, for me, it's an obligation to my fellow people. I mean, this is a higher calling for me. This is why I do this work. It's for the common good. It's for the many. It's not for a single person, but it's for the survival of communities. It's for people. It's for wildlife. It's for nature. And why can't we all work together to ensure that we have sustainable water for years to come is something I wrestle with.
Doesn't the cost of pumping, as you go deeper, you have to pay more to get your water up. Seems like that would deter some of these folks, wouldn't it?
Yes, well, they're at the point now where to even drill a supplemental well, we're reaching that, oh, is that worth the investment? Not really. And I've got some lands not in my project area, but there are some that have 6, 7 supplemental wells trying to get the same amount out of the ground that they were getting with one. Um, so I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that I'm pushing back, and I'm going to continue to push back on supplemental wells being accepted in the Curry County Basin. Don't drill any more supplemental wells. We're going to have to think differently about what we allow under the Office of the State Engineer in the well world, in the water rights world. Because right now, where I survive, live, and breathe every day, I've got a lot more paper water rights than I have actual wet water.
Well, thank you so much again, Ladonna. Yeah, share Christy's sentiment. Really remarkable work. And thank you for taking the time. I will share this, hopefully posted to YouTube, so that those who couldn't make it can catch up with your work and be in touch with you if they have questions. Um,
Okay.
yeah, thank you so much, and thanks to those of you who made it today. All right,
I feel just as good about talking to 4 of you as 10 of you.
all right, great.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.